Absent-minded. All of us have our experiences with being absent-minded. Sometimes we may be thinking of a problem, and someone says something to us, and we don't catch a word of it. This kind of thing, however, shouldn't happen very often. Old Jung, though, is Mr. Absent-minded himself. We were in the same class in high school. Old Jung was really good in academics and always ranked at the top of the class. Whenever he was on stage to pick up his awards, for about 2 fleeting seconds, a look of bewilderment, as if he'd forgotten where he was, would flash across his face. Everyone noticed this, but because this expression came and went so quickly, well, no one actually ever asked him what it was all about. After he finished his studies, Old Jung became a university professor. We all know being a professor is not easy. You have the teaching to handle, and then the research to do. None of it was much of a problem for Old Jung. The feeling he gave us was that he was an especially lucky fellow. He was smart when he was young, and studying just wasn't at all difficult. What we never thought was that his research didn't give him any problems either. He sailed quickly through the promotion process and soon was a full professor. Accolades and awards just kept right on coming. Whenever we old friends got together with him, a frequent occurrence, we noticed that Old Jung's weakness hadn't gotten any less. One day, someone in our group just couldn't take it any longer and blurted the question straight out. He asked Old Jung what this sudden state of discombobulation was all about. When he abruptly lost consciousness of where he was and what he was doing, what was happening inside his head anyway? He answered that, actually, nothing at all was on his mind when it happened. The only thing was, without rhyme or reason, he'd hear a voice say, "You, take me with you." As far as Old Jung was concerned, the words made no sense. Thus, he couldn't help but think the whole affair was just very odd. He, of course, gave some thought to it, but could never get an answer for it, and simply left it at that. It never occurred to him that at middle life he would still be hearing the voice he'd heard in high school. We were all quite concerned because a movie came to our mind called A Beautiful Mind. The protagonist in the film was John Forbes Nash Jr., the Nobel laureate in economics who is exceptionally intelligent but suffers from hallucinatory hearing, an illness that causes him to hear voices murmuring in his ear. A buddy suggested to Old Jung that he consult a doctor that specializes in this condition. Old Jung said he had already gone to doctors. They had all confirmed that nothing was wrong with his health. They claimed it could not happen that a person with hallucinatory hearing would hear the same words all the time. When someone asked if it were the voice of a child or an adult, Old Jung thought a moment and said it was the voice of a child. The friend asked if the voice were of a girl or a boy, and he said he had heard both. We also asked him the nature of the circumstances in which he heard this voice. His answer was that he had once taken notes and discovered he could hear it in many sorts of places. Whenever he received an award, he was sure to hear the voice. When he read a newspaper or surfed the internet or watched television, he could also hear it. He did not remember everything so clearly, whether it occurred with certain programs or during certain kinds of news reports. He recalled, however, hearing it when he read BBC News online or watched BBC News on television. Old Jung's hearing of these imaginary voices made his wife feel a bit scared. She always felt old Zhang loved his research just a little too much, so she often drove with him to relax in the countryside. On weekends, there weren't many folks around. Old Zhang would see an elementary school and step inside for a look around. He would suddenly get dreamy, and who would have thought that in such a distant and desolated place, he'd still hear the words, "You, take me with you." We asked when this definitely did not happen to him. He had an answer for this. He said whenever he was with his family or friends, it seemed he never heard the voices. Playing tennis, he never heard anything. Doing research, he never heard anything. Reading a crime story, he never heard anything. But when he was at Mass on Sundays, he could hear the voice. In fact, it often happened there. None of us could figure any of this out. But no one was overly concerned about old Zhang. It was clear that he himself knew that he had hallucinatory hearing. What was more, the problem did not affect him in any negative way. A group of us went mountain climbing recently in the suburbs. We reached halfway up the mountain and then came upon a flight of stone steps, which was the only way that led to the top. Halfway up that mountain, we saw a little boy who stood at the foot of the steps. He took a step forward and then stopped. From his posture, we ascertained that he was physically challenged. He was able to walk all right, but he was lame. His way of walking was truly pitiful. It looked like he had his heart set on climbing that mountain, but there was probably just no way he could do it. Old Zhang went right up to him. He asked the boy if he wanted him to help him make the ascent. The little fellow nodded his head. Old Zhang and the little boy led the attack as we made our way slowly up to the peak. There was a rest area at the top of the mountain, and old Zhang helped the boy sit in a way that could look out and take in all that wonderful scenery below. The little boy laughed happily and kept thanking old Zhang. When it was time for us to descend the mountain, old Zhang asked the boy if he wanted to go with us. Climbing down is harder than climbing up, and the descent was so steep that if he didn't have a little help, there was just no way he'd be able to do it. Unexpectedly, however, the boy shook his head and said he wanted to stay up there and enjoy the scenery. We found the little boy was quite determined indeed, so we headed down by ourselves. When we arrived at the foot of the mountain, old Zhang suddenly asked us if the little boy was wearing shorts. We all said he had been wearing shorts. Old Zhang asked us, "Does a little guy who is physically impaired like to wear shorts?" After that, old Zhang asked someone else, "Were the legs of the child very strong?" We thought back on it and recalled the boy's legs were dark and strong. No wonder he didn't want our help getting down the mountain. But why would the little boy want to trick us? The question perplexed us. We pondered this on our way back. No one could come up with an answer. That night, I was already asleep in bed when old Zhang called me on the telephone. He said he had come to an understanding about the whole thing. Not only that, but he thought that from that time onward, he wouldn't be having any of those absent-minded spells of his. I had been in the midst of a very deep sleep and was by no means keen on listening to his explanation. Anyway, he really didn't explain anything. From that moment on, old Zhang no longer got discombobulated. He frequently excused himself from our get-togethers. Why? It turned out that from that day on, he began giving English and mathematics lessons to disabled children. Then one day, a very wealthy man made a hefty donation. Old Zhang didn't leave it idle. He used it to establish a carefully constructed foundation for the care of children with disabilities. Old Zhang told us that when he was about to start climbing the stone steps on the mountainside and again heard the words, "You, take me with you," he finally understood what the words meant. Although he himself had been sailing along and moving smoothly up the ladder of society, there was many a poor child who could never make that climb like him. So they called out for him to help them. They hoped he could help them make that climb too. He had always heard the words, but never grasped their meaning. Until that day, that is, when he saw the little boy on the side of the mountain. Then it sank in what this "you, take me with you" meant. Old Zhang recalled that every time he came upon a moment of unusual success, he would hear, "You, take me with you." No wonder then that when he received an award, that spell of confusion and absent-mindedness fell upon him. In addition to those moments, whenever he learned of particularly tragic news events, the words came back to him again. Clearly, someone out there kept reminding him that he should not simply go about his own business, but help people who were not as lucky as he was. Old Zhang had a child who had trouble with mathematics. Old Zhang solved his problems every time. When he was in high school, the child had difficulties at first with English, and again it was old Zhang that came to his assistance. Afterwards, there were no problems. What was more, old Zhang asked one of his doctoral students to tutor his child at home, so his son sailed through academically. Not only that, but old Zhang's son developed a habit for studying from early on. Old Zhang and his wife traveled abroad frequently, and their son knew a lot of things that other children didn't know. Their son presently studies at a very good public high school and is good at writing computer programs and can read English novels. Old Zhang is not certain that his son will shine, but it's clear the child is on a straight path to success up the steps of society. Old Zhang knows that many children are not this lucky. Their dads have no way to teach them English or mathematics, and haven't enough money to hire someone for home tutoring, much less send them to a cram school. These children have not seen much of the island, not to mention traveled abroad. A habit of studying is equally unthinkable for them. For children with disabilities, it is of course just very hard to even think about climbing higher in life. Old Zhang is absolutely determined to do the best he can to help these children study well. He has discovered that he indeed could be of help. The children he has taught have all done well. Many more have received help from his foundation. Most important of all, he no longer hears that voice that says, "You, take me with you." The day before yesterday, I went to old Zhang's foundation to take a look around. I found an interesting painting there. An adult holds the hand of a child. A group of middle-aged people is climbing a flight of steps. At the bottom of the painting are 4 words, "You, take me with you." The 3 words, "You, carry me," are written on the canvas. Old Zhang has carried many bright children up the long flight of steps of society. I can see, however, that he is not satisfied yet. He wants to push children with disabilities up even higher steps.